Okay, we're going to continue on in our little kind of summer series that we've been doing on the letter to the church in Thessalonica, which is called First Thessalonians. And so this is the fifth week in a row that we've been doing it, fifth week in a row that I've been speaking. And if you've been here all 5 weeks, then come and see me at the end and I will take you out for lunch. And probably dinner as well, because none of you have. But it's been I really enjoyed it. And you can listen again if you want to, or you can ask me and I'll send you my notes and you can just race through them in a few minutes and consider what this letter kind of has to say. A lot of it is just about how to be a thriving church, a healthy church, a church that knows what it's for and what it's not for. The church in Thessalonica was being persecuted. They were going through a really difficult time, but they were thriving at the same time. You know, they knew what their purpose was. They knew who Jesus was. They were expecting him to show up when they worshipped, and they were, of course, expecting him to come back again in their lifetime, which didn't happen. Let's just get stuck into the passage before I just riff for the next 20 minutes. Who would like to read a few verses from 1 Thessalonians? Anybody feeling like they would like to read? Yes, Lewis, go for it. Lewis and Grace, fantastic. Trying to melt everyone's hearts this morning. It's just on here, or you can read there.
What one? 13?
Just that whole bit, yeah.
Today?
Yeah.
Now we ask you, brother and sister, to acknowledge those who work hard amongst you, who care for you in the Lord, and who admonish you. Hold them in the highest regard in love because of their work. Live in peace with each other, and we urge you, brothers and sisters, warn those who idle and disruptive, encourage and disheartened. Help the weak, be patient with everybody. Make sure that nobody pays back wrong for wrong, but always strive to do what is good for each other and everyone else.
Amazing. Well done. Fantastic. Well done, Grace. Yeah. Yeah, why weren't you like that for the dedication? Thanks so much, Lewis. That's brilliant. There's a famous African proverb, apparently, maybe people can correct me if I'm wrong, that says, if you want to go quickly, go alone, and if you want to go far, go together. Anybody heard that one before? Maybe not. Maybe you've seen it on an HSBC advert or something like that, I don't know. If you want to go quickly, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I don't know about you, but a lot of the world, to me, seems more concerned about getting rich quickly and developing their own brand and their own name and their own stuff than investing in things that will outlast them at the moment. It's all about me, very much. Than investing in things that you're not going to see the fruit of, or you're not going to see the produce of. So Paul, in this letter, is encouraging the church to walk in a different spirit, to walk differently than the way that he sees the world around him, and I think probably the way that he would see the world around us as well. What he's doing is he starts churches in different random parts of Europe and Asia Minor. It's not an opportunistic kind of money-making startup. He's not looking to make a quick buck. He's not looking to make a name for himself either. Paul was not a Bitcoin bro. Okay, he spent, in fact, the last few pages writing about eternity. He's been writing about eternity. And he begins chapter 5 saying, live expecting Jesus to come back at any point. Live in that way. Grieve with hope is what we spoke about last week, because we are a community that's connected to eternity. We're a community that's connected to Jesus, the first word and the last word of creation. If you want to go quickly, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And Paul has written to the Thessalonians about how to live in the face of persecution, to expect Jesus to come back at any point, and now he finishes with some important advice. And it's clear that he loves the church in Thessalonica, and he desperately wants them to flourish, and he desperately wants them to be healthy. But it's almost like he knew it's quite hard to be a healthy church. It takes a lot of work, and a lot of churches maybe want to get there but don't. Some churches just, no, we're not bothered about that. Here at Stenhouse Baptist, we are bothered about being a healthy church. So we want to take what Paul has to say and treat it with real kind of consideration this morning. And reading these words this week as I've prepared has reminded me just something very simple around leadership. And that's that a good leader's job is to keep the vision and the heart and the soul of what you're doing at the center of everything. And I was reading this, and Paul's given this incredible advice about, we'll get into it, but I was thinking, do I do that well enough here? How do we keep the main thing the main thing? People come and people go. We're in Edinburgh. People move away. People come. Do people know what we're all about here at Stenhouse? And the vision that we started with here is very simple: to see lives transformed by Jesus and to walk the long roads alongside people, alongside each other in our ups and our downs. And Jesus encountered people one at a time. Yeah, he spoke to crowds, but so much of the stories that we read in the Gospels are about him just meeting one person once at a time. And we want to be a church that models itself on the life of Jesus Christ. And one of my favorite quotes about building community comes from this guy, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who defied the spirit of the age and stood against the Nazis. And he was killed for his courage in standing up for what he believed in and his faith. But he said this about community. He said, the person who loves their dream of community will destroy community, but the person who loves those around them will create community. So we don't start out with this mindset of creating this incredible, perfect, utopian community. Instead, we just go with the mindset of, who can I bless today? Who can I speak life to today? Or maybe a bit more medium, long term, who are the one or two people, God, that you are sort of pointing out to me that I can live life alongside, that I can get alongside, maybe that I can befriend, or even maybe that I can just receive from? Because we all have times where we're doing well and we can offer things, and we all have times where we're struggling and we need people to be there for us, don't we? So a little bit about the vision. We're not all about an all-singing, all-dancing Sunday service, as you may have gathered, although we love getting together. We're not preoccupied with numerical growth. We're about doing life together and sharing life with those that we meet too. And we have all these different groups and things that Joyce has let us know about in order that we can bless people, meet people, and also receive from people, because we've got a lot to receive from this community around us too. And so, for Paul, the idea that a church would, over the centuries, become a place where people sort of rocked up for an hour, maybe an hour and 20 minutes if you're unlucky, would be completely foreign to him. He would have been like, sorry, what is this? What is going on? He was part of a countercultural, persecuted for their allegiance to Jesus, loving their enemies, go to death for what they believed in community. That was a sort of community that he belonged to. And so you read this letter and you kind of think, what has happened along the way to the Jesus way in our churches? And we touched upon this a little bit in week 1, but we live in a world that is obsessed with image and how we appear to others, and that way of thinking has totally made its way into our churches too. On Wednesday, some of you'll know, I was very excited. I had a very good day. Faith saw me on Thursday morning, and I was still smiling from one side of my mouth to the other. And I was so happy because I got to see my beloved Aston Villa play in Scotland for the first time in 36 years. And I was expecting not to get a ticket, and I got a ticket 45 minutes before the game started with a friend that I have who just phoned me, was like, can you get here in 30 minutes? And I said, Yes. And I may or may not have been supposed to be speaking at Connect and also leading worship at Connect. But thank you, Mark. I'd kind of been prepping Mark since he got back from holiday, saying to him, listen, if I get a ticket, I'm going to go. If I get a ticket, I'm going to go. And it kind of got to 3 p.m. in the afternoon. I was like, this feels a bit dodgy now. I can't really do this to Mark. I'm going to do this to Mark. And so the only thing was that the ticket was in the Hibs end. So I wasn't with the 900 fans from Birmingham that had travelled up in the buses. And so I had this ticket. I wasn't sitting with anybody I knew, just some random, I'd love to say perfectly lovely, but they weren't really that lovely. They were relatively scary blokes. So for 2 quite strange hours, I had to pretend that I was a Hibs fan. Waited for this moment all my life. I kind of had to sit there, and I didn't know any of the songs, but I picked up, there's one which goes, glory, glory to the high bees. I kind of joined in with that one pretty quickly. I was like, I can do that one. So I sung that one really loudly, and we won 5-0, okay? But I couldn't celebrate any of the goals because I would have been completely hospitalized. And I had to pretend to be really sad when we scored. We'd get another goal, and I'd be like, oh, not a 5th goal. Guys, are you seeing what I'm seeing? And the point is, to share a silly story, yes. But also, what's going on the outside doesn't really matter that much, does it sometimes? It's what's going on under the surface that really matters. And I'm kind of thinking about myself, and I was completely faking it that night. I was faking it, not to make it, just to fake it. And that can be true individually with us, as we all wear masks in different parts of our lives and pretend to be people maybe that sometimes we're not. But that's also true for us as churches as well. Not every church that appears to be the happiest, shiniest, got it all together place will be. There'll be stuff maybe under the surface that they are not wanting to address or refusing to go there. Not every church that comes across as lifeless and, bereft of having good things about it is out of touch as you think it might be. We go back to that old thing, that the old adage that man looks on the outside, but God looks in the heart. And that's true of our churches as well. That's true of our small groups. That's true of every group that we're part of. And maybe the things that we've written off may be closer to King Jesus than we actually realize. And so Paul, I think, speaks into that. He has this unbelievable wisdom for churches. He says, focus on what's underneath the surface, not just on what people can see. Invest in the eternal things. Move beyond how it all looks, and you will reap what you sow. If you invest in going deep, foundations, roots, you will reap what you sow. And so firstly, he says, honor those who work hard. R-E-S-P-E-C-T. And he says, hold them in the highest regard in love because of their work. It's just really simple, but really powerful, important. It's important to say thank you. To say thank you to Lewis, not that Lewis, the other Lewis who built that sound desk on a random Sunday afternoon just because he did. We say thank you to Lewis. You don't need to clap, it's fine. To say thank you to the kids the kids leaders who invest in our young people so dedicatedly. It's really hard coming up with lessons and plans and energy for the amazing way that they serve our kids. Saying thank you and respecting and honoring Mark, who's worked tirelessly this summer and for the last 2 years to help us connect into the community in a new way and share our hope with people around us. Or Grace, who sat here at the front, who has come the last few Sundays at 9:45 and helped us set out all the chairs. We want to honor people as they... Oh, Grace gets a clap. Okay, yeah. And, we want to honor people. Churches often can be good at honoring people with the most money. They give them a seat at the table, give them the influence, the power. But what use is that? That's just what the world does. We want to honor people in a different way. For those of us who work hard, we don't do it for the praise, we do it for God, we do it for the Lord. But it's important to know that our work is seen and our work is valued. I want to ask us, who can you honor today? Who can you say thank you today? Who can you appreciate and recognize the hard work of? Maybe you want to stick around a little bit longer today where you'd normally just head straight out the door and actually say, I'm going to stick around, I'm going to make a beeline for that person and just say, thank you for what you do. It doesn't need to be Sunday related. It can be anything that you've seen them doing. Let me say this. If you've never had any little bit of friction with anybody here at Stenhouse Baptist Church, if you've never experienced a little bit of discomfort or tension, and you thought the reason for that was that we're all so lovely and so perfect, you're wrong. Sorry to break it to you this morning. We are lovely, but we're not perfect. And maybe one of the reasons that you've never had any friction with anybody is because you're still finding your way into community life, you know? Because in community life, friction, tension, discomfort is part of the deal, okay? It's how you deal with it. It's how you work it through. And Paul knew about friction. In fact, I think he was sometimes quite a tricky guy to work with, Paul. He knew that figuring out community life is really similar to being in a healthy relationship. And that's why he said, he kind of went through it, a few things quite quickly, which I'm going to take us through. He said, firstly, live at peace with one another. Just like a relationship or maybe a marriage or a friendship, you have to work at it. We're all different. We all have different ideas of what church should be. We all have different ideas of different experiences of what church has been. And so living at peace takes hard work. It takes conversations, and most of all, it takes listening and understanding. Second thing was warn those who are idle and disruptive. And that's not talking about the under ones. And this is not a carte blanche kind of invitation for you to wander up to the service, somebody after the service and say, hey, I can't help but notice that you don't do anything around here. It's not that. But a strong community, I think, has the love and the trust to sometimes say hard things to one another as well. And this is a delicate thing, and it's an easy thing to get wrong, but a community that never addresses behaviors that are unhelpful, or the elephants in the room, it doesn't grow deeper together. It just sort of skates around at the surface level, like I'm thinking of that kind of insect that you get on ponds that has the kind of long legs. Anybody, is it called a skater? What, sorry? Pond skater. Oh, I should have just gone for it and just guessed. And we never get to go deeper with one another, because we're just avoiding it all the whole time. Sometimes we can have these conversations which say stuff like, I noticed, hey, how's it going? I noticed that you kind of got an issue with so-and-so, and I was wondering if, maybe it would be a good idea for you to talk to them about it at some point, as opposed to talking to everybody else about them. And, maybe I'd be happy to be part of the conversation if that would be a helpful thing. Strong communities say things like that. Strong communities have the courage or the confidence to say, hey, I've noticed that you haven't replied to my last 573 text messages, and I just wonder if there's maybe a better way that we could stay in touch, because that's maybe not what's working for you. Warn those who are idle and disruptive. I'm taking that to mean have the difficult conversation sometimes. Push through it, because what's better on the other side, what is on the other side is better. It's worth it, even though it's hard. The third thing he says is encourage the disheartened, help the weak, and be patient with everyone. Rick Warren describes the church as a hospital for sinners and not a museum for saints. A hospital for sinners and not a museum for saints. And I just love that. I normally forget little kind of catchy phrases like that, but I've always remembered that one. Church should be the place where we know we can come when we're broken. How many times have you heard people say, oh, I'm just not in a good place at the moment. I'm just not going to be around for weeks, months, years. We should be known in West Edinburgh not for our building or the stuff that we run, but our heart for those who've hit rock bottom. I remember a few years ago, a local lady was going through a really hard situation. I didn't really know her very well, and she just wanted to sit in the church building. And I wasn't really used to this sort of thing. I was just, can I just come and sit here for a while? And I was like, yeah, I suppose so. It's just in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon. It was me and one other person here. And I kind of had no idea what to do. I just sat out a few chairs, and I went on Spotify and just put on some relaxing worship music and hid in the kitchen afterwards and just hoped that she had a good time. And yeah, a few weeks later, she shared that she'd really encountered God in this space in a really profound way. And then a couple of years later, she's been baptized and comes along to Bible study every week. And I had no idea what I was doing. I could just offer what I had to offer in that moment. But that was a significant moment for her. Silver and gold I do not have, said Peter and John, but what I have I will share with you. And often we write ourselves off and we think, I can't really help anybody. You can. We can all give something of our experience, of our love, of our time, or our energy. Some of you will have seen the fancy coffee machine on the way in and wondered if it's some sort of sick joke that the coffee we have after church is quite basic. But yeah, we have a coffee machine, and it's not a prop, and you're not being sort of punked or anything like that. But we work with Junction 42 and Edinburgh City Mission, and we're training people up, people who've had convictions, to become expert coffee makers, baristas. And Miles, who runs it on Thursday, he told me the other day that 2 now of the last course attendees have got jobs in hospitality, in making coffee. Isn't that just amazing? It's like, actually, this is the stuff that we're doing, the emails that we send, the stuff that we're praying about is actually having a really radical difference in people's lives. Somebody else got back and came back and told us about how helping out just for one morning in the garden in Goodroots had given them the lift that they really needed to just kind of get their life back on track. We didn't do anything special. In fact, we just asked them to shovel an inordinate amount of compost that morning, and I've kind of felt guilty for working them too hard, but they came back and said, that was incredible, I love it, I'll come back every week. And they didn't, but it still gave them that lift that they needed in that place. Somebody else got given a laptop, our drop-in, which is it is 11 to 1 on Thursdays. Bethany bought them a laptop, and they used it to write a CV to get their first job in literally decades, I think 30 years or something like that. And they're still doing that job. Somebody in recovery who's been coming along to connect, and other groups around the city as well, gave their life to follow Jesus last Sunday. There are so many different ways in which we're seeing God's kingdom, heaven, touching earth at the moment. And I love it. Somebody else from our church is helping out a family with a newborn who are finding things really hard at the moment. They're giving days and nights of care and devotion to this family. And it's such a privilege for me. I'm really, really lucky. I get to see all this stuff happen. I get to see the hard things, but mainly I just get to rejoice. And as Joyce was saying about the email, grateful. Every time we meet together as a church membership, I start saying, I'm just grateful, and I am, because it's incredible seeing God at work. And I just see probably just the tip of the iceberg. There are so many more stories in your lives, stories in the church. And a few people have asked, because they know that I'm going away in sabbatical, are you going to write a book on your sabbatical? There are 2 things to that. Firstly, it's 6 weeks, not 6 months. And secondly, no. But I could, because the stories that I've seen and the ways that I've seen God move in the last 7 years have just been such a blessing. And we want to pray for more and more people to find that hope and their faith. Oh, sorry, am I done? Trisha, you don't even come here regularly, okay? You can't just come and tell me when to stop speaking. That's outrageous. Number 4, and the final thing, Trisha, that we're going to look at in this series is from verse 5, and is just a really easy, simple, nice, easy one to finish on. And that says, make sure that nobody pays back wrong for wrong. Just an easy one, The first 3 things you've mentioned are powerful things, but really you kind of expect any group that you're part of to look to do these things. Encourage people who are going through difficult times, provide for people, support people. But this one, I think, really sets the church apart in its calling. What I love about this letter is that Paul is connecting the big picture theology of what's been and what is to come with the everyday life of a believer. And this is so important. So what's happening in heaven is connected to our everyday lives on earth as it is in heaven, as Jesus told us to pray. And in the heavenly realm, everybody is worshipping the Lamb who was slain. That's Jesus, who freely and willingly went to the cross. And the way that he saved us was through mercy. He saved us through mercy. He's removed our sin from us completely as we're found in Christ, now that we belong to him. And so we walk in the same way. We walk in the way of the Lamb. We offer mercy to the world and one another. It starts with one another. We don't pay back wrong for wrong. We don't walk in the way of revenge. By the way, this doesn't mean that anything goes and that we just let people walk all over us and abuse our good nature. Of course not. But it does mean that the relentless cycle of revenge that has been dominating our world ever since Cain murdered Abel back in Genesis has come to its end on the cross. Because Jesus has shown us how to live differently. And we are Christ's ambassadors, for those of you who remember week number 2, by what we say, of course, but primarily how we live. Do you have grievances? Take them to that person or give them to God. Don't hold on to them forever. Don't let them make you bitter. Do you have grudges? They might be totally legit, but we don't pay back wrong for wrong. We offer mercy to one another. We resolve dysfunction. We embody the love of God to one another and to the world. That was week 3. Firstly, we show love to one another, and then it overflows out into the world. Jesus said, you've heard it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. If you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Aren't even the tax collectors doing that? And if you greet only your own people, what are you doing more than others? Do not even the pagans do that? Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. Guys, just be perfect, okay? All right? What are you doing? Just be perfect. And so next time you're in a dispute with your neighbor or your colleague or something's happened on WhatsApp, that's probably the most likely thing, isn't it? Think, does my life speak mercy to a world that operates in violence or tit for tat or wrong for wrong? Does my life speak mercy and tell the story of mercy? This is the path of the believer and the child of God, and this is the way of the church that we are called to walk in together. And I love walking it with you guys. But we're not there yet, are we? You know, we can go deeper and farther up and farther in, as they say at the end of the Chronicles of Narnia. Just want to finish just by reading this kind of poem/prayer. I didn't write it, by the way, but it says this: in an age where Christianity is distorted by hollow consumerism, shallow pragmatism, narrow fundamentalism, and selfish individualism, we seek a more authentic Christianity. By choosing to be radically